Mark Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's my great pleasure to take a call on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Can I acknowledge the Minister in the Chair? And can I open by saying that I would like to acknowledge the Honourable Tim Grosser and the role that he had in delivering this free trade agreement. And I also want to acknowledge the advisors and our head negotiator, David Walker. Sorry, yeah, thank you, Minister. I want to highlight one point: is that Minister Gross has copped a bit of criticism in the House tonight around transparency and around consultation, and I just want to say that I remember when we were hearing submissions in the first go round with the treaty. And we had the trade unions come in to the committee, and one of the things that they raised, and they were quite upset about, is that there was no consultation. And of course there was a fair bit of public debate going on about that, and we were trying to listen very closely to it. But on closer questioning, it actually turned out that the trade unions, there had been a fair bit of consultation. That's right. And they'd actually been given 3 meetings with the negotiators and with the Minister to discuss what was in the free trade agreement. So, and that was a trend that continued throughout the process. So I just wanted to set the record straight a little bit in terms of Minister Grosser and the work that was done around consultation. I do, however, want to acknowledge Minister Macleay, because on taking over the role as our Trade Minister, he embarked. It was very clear that I feel that we had listened, and there were genuine concerns in the community about the lack of consultation and transparency around the agreement. And I have to say that Minister Macleay embarked on a series of over 50 public meetings around the country. He took other senior ministers with him. He took David Walker and our officials that had been dealing with the free trade agreement, and he embarked on a very comprehensive program of public meetings. I think the best way to highlight the effect that these public meetings had is to talk about the amount of submissions that were received on our first go around with the text or the treaty, and then the amount of submissions that we received when we actually had the legislation come onto the committee. So, in the first go round, when we went out, the committee went out and asked for submissions in relation to the treaty. We received over 10,000 submissions. So, admittedly, many of those were pro forma submissions, but we received over 10,000. When we went back out and we asked and said to the submitters who would like to actually come in front of the committee and make an oral submission, we had about 300 people come back and say that they'd like to make an oral submission to the committee. We went to Auckland, we heard submissions in Wellington, we travelled to the South Island and Christchurch to make sure that everyone had easy access to the committee. The committee, and I want to acknowledge them, I'd like to acknowledge David Shearer and David Clark from the Labour Party, Dr Kennedy Graham from the Greens Party, Fletcher Tabato from New Zealand First. On our side of the committee, we had Shane Reddy, Lindsay Tish, Todd Muller, Jamie Lee Ross and David Bennett. Although it was very obvious that, that the Labour, Greens and New Zealand First members had taken a position against the agreement, and of course the government members were in support of it, I have to say that the committee decided right from the get-go that submitters that were coming in front of the committee would be listened to very, very carefully. Their issues would be recorded and we would address those with our advisors. And that was a process that worked very, very well. And so I want to acknowledge the whole committee who came together and worked in a spirit of making sure that the submitters were heard and their issues were addressed. I'm not a cynic. Some people would say that that was just purely part of the process. Yes, it was part of the process, but it was an important part of the process in terms of giving people an ability to raise their concerns and have their say. In relation to, I just want to address one issue that was raised, I think it was by Dr Megan Woods, and that was around Whāmek. So, yes, in relation to Farm Act, there is some additional cost. Mr Chair.
Mark Mitchell.
For a program that is funded at about $800 million and growing, the only change to the model around Farm Act, and I don't have all the detail in front of me, I may need to be corrected, the Minister can do that if I do, but from memory, the only real change to the Farm Act model is that there is allowed to be an additional review asked for inside the model, which meant that we basically had to budget around $2 million as a one-off cost up front. And when you think about the size of the actual program, over $800 million annually, that's a very, very small and insignificant cost, and it does not change the Farm Act model in itself at all. I'd just say too, Mr Chair, that in relation to support for the TPP, of course we're all watching with bated breath to see the results of the American elections. I'd have to say that in the House tonight it's been stated that Senator Clinton has taken a position against the TPP. That's not entirely true. She's actually stated that they would have a fresh look at it. However, it is true, and I do agree with the opposition members that that Mr Trump's policy in relation to the TPP is very closely aligned to the Labor policy on the TPP. The only other point that I would make, Mr Chair, is this: is that there has been some support for the Trans-Pacific Partnership from the opposition parties, from highly respected leaders within the party, and that is, of course, the Right Honourable Helen Clark and the Right Honourable Mike Moore, both of whom have come out publicly and very clearly in strong support of the TPP. So, Mr Speaker, it's with great pleasure that I stand and support in this House the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Thank you.